Hi, I'm Rita. Welcome back to my booktube channel, Life Worth Reading. Today, I'm filming my April wrap-up, but be warned, April was kind of a bad reading month for me. I didn't enjoy a lot of the books that I read, and so be warned that this is not the greatest wrap-up you will ever see in your life. I am calling this the Curse of the 3 Stars because that's what I mostly rated the books this month. And I already didn't film a March wrap-up because March was also a very bad reading month where I didn't enjoy most of what I read. But honestly, in between me not filming 2 wrap-ups in a row or me filming a slightly more negative wrap-up, I am choosing to do the latter. And so here I am to talk about the 7 books I read in April. If you've seen my latest wrap-up, which was in February, I started doing this little wrap-up game where I took bookish prompts and superlatives and tried to apply them to each of the books that I had read that month. In that video, I did it with a random wheel online, but actually this time I wrote all the prompts on pieces of paper like you have here. And so all the superlatives and all the prompts are here, and I'll be picking each one by hand because I just didn't really love the aesthetic of the wheel. I'm trying out new things. If this doesn't work, I'll go back to the wheel, but we're trying it for this month. Just some stats before we start. Like I said, I read 7 books in April, which was the least books that I've read this year so far. Not great, and that amounts to 2,264 pages. In terms of average rating, like I mentioned, not great, and so my average rating for April was 3.43 stars, I think, which not good. Not good at all. I read 1 physical book and I read 6 ebooks. There was one where it was like mixed between audio and ebook, but I mostly read it on ebook, most of them on SCRIBD. I also will leave referral link in the description for 2 months free on SCRIBD. You should really check them out. They have the largest digital library ever, audiobooks, ebooks. It's where I read most of what I do read, and so you should definitely check it out. And my most read genre was actually mystery, with 4 books out of 7. So without further ado, let's just take the prompts out and see what we have to talk about. Our first bookish prompt or superlative for the wrap-up is a book you want everyone to read. Okay. For our first prompt, we have a book you want everyone to read, and for this prompt, I am going to talk about my highlight of April, and that was Elena Knows by Claudia Pinheiro. This book was incredible. It was an immediate 5 stars. It was the best thing that I read in April, and it was just a book that is so incredible, and I just can't stop thinking about it, honestly, because it just left a really big impression on me. This book was translated from Spanish. The author is Argentinian, and I just really love this story. It follows Elena, whose daughter Rita just died. She was found hanging from the church tower, the church bell tower, something like that, and Elena knows that it wasn't a suicide. So her whole point throughout this book, that is a very short read, by the way, her whole point and her whole purpose in the story is to prove to anyone who cares that her daughter did not commit suicide. But the problem is that Elena is suffering from a very advanced and horrible case of Parkinson's that is very rare within patients, and she is slowly losing control of her own body, and she is living pill by pill, like every few hours, because her body no longer obeys her. And it is a very hard and naked, cruel look into disability and what it means to lose control of your physical body when your mind wants to achieve so much still, and the barriers of walking around, of taking the subway, of doing things on your own when you are so limited by your own body. And Rita was her caregiver, and they had a very interesting relationship. They were not the greatest mother and daughter, but they loved each other in their own way. And so when Rita is found dead, Elena is just left with this goal to prove that it wasn't a suicide, that her daughter could never have committed a suicide. And it was a very, very touching story. I loved the hard look into disabilities. It was very, very sad sometimes, but Elena has this fire in her, and she has this purpose that is so commendable. And I just really, really love this story, and I think everyone would benefit from reading this. It was incredible. It is shortlisted for the International Booker Prize, and honestly, I kind of hope that it wins because it was very, very incredible. Then for our second prompt, we have a book you'd recommend your worst enemy. I have a few. Now, I don't have a lot of books this month that I would recommend to my worst enemy, and I don't think that this one makes any sense either, but I'm going to try to explain it. I think I'm recommending The Stranger by Albert Camus. I read this book in April for a class. I had to do like this whole critical essay on it, and while it was a very interesting piece of literature to write an essay about, I think that I recommend this to my worst enemy because it is just so distant from a reality. It's a study of existentialism and absurdism. I think that's how you say it in English. And so it is very philosophical in a way of, why do we exist? What does it mean to exist? What does it mean to have wishes and goals and wants and needs? And I think like it would drive my worst enemy a bit insane reading this and knowing that it was recommended because of that. But I'm really not sure if that makes any sense at all. Basically, the story follows our main character, Marceau, and he is a very weird man. And so he's a stranger in his own world because he does not feel like others do. He does not exist like others do. And so it is a very strange look into his way of thinking, because as human beings, we experience such a array of emotions and such different feelings, and he just doesn't. And it's very weird. He has like this really strange moral compass. He does things that you're just reading about and you're like, why did you do that? That makes no sense, and that's not a good thing to do. And something happens in the midway point that completely changes the direction of the story that I did enjoy. And it's all about finding peace in the absurdity of life. And I don't know, I just think like an existential book is a good one to recommend to your worst enemy, because it would leave them thinking about their life and hopefully going to an existential crisis and what could be better. Then our third prompt is most likely to end up on the worst of the year list. Now for this one, I couldn't give it to any other book. I had to give it to my lowest rated because I think that's what makes the most sense. But I'm not sure if this is going to end up on the worst of the year list. I think it might be in the most disappointing of the year list, and that is The Maid by Anita Prose. I read this for April for the prompt of a new release. It is a mystery. I knew it wasn't a thriller going into it, so that was not a problem for me. But it's basically about a maid called Molly, and she is a hotel maid that absolutely adores her job and finds such comfort and peace in the routine of her job and leaving things completely spotless. But a very, very wealthy patron that is a frequent guest of the hotel is murdered, and she is implicated into the murder because she is neurodivergent, clearly, even though it is not explicitly said in the book, she is. And so she is wrapped up into this investigation because she does not act like a normal human being, or doesn't have like the most human reactions. And so she's wrapped up in this investigation. And what can I say? This book was a disappointment. I gave it 2.25, 2.5, whatever. The mystery wasn't great. You kind of knew where it was going, but then it like, after everything wraps up, it just flips you and it says like, oh, this is actually what happened. And you're like, and it's not even a good satisfying twist. It is not, because it is not done in a very satisfying way. So the mystery wasn't great, and I did like our main character Molly, but after reading a few critiques of her character, I have to say that I do agree with some of them, because even though it is not necessary in every single book that features a neurodivergent character for them to be labeled as such or have a label in the spectrum or anything like that, that is not absolutely essential for a book to work and for a character to work. But in this case, it just felt very, I read this one review that was like, this feels like a very like manic pixie dream girl, but like neurodivergent type of way. But I can't really explain it. So Molly is just this very innocent cinnamon roll character. It is very hard for us to identify with her, and not only that, but to really understand her actions, because there's a lot of obvious things going on in the book, and they may be obvious to us, but they're not obvious to her. And it just felt a little bit like she was like this perfect girl because of her neurodivergency. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that correctly. There are a lot of other critiques out there that are explaining it much better than I am, but yeah, I could have overlooked it a little bit if the mystery had been great, but the mystery was not good. I wasn't thrilled by any of it. I wasn't very interested in any of it, and so it was very hard to combine those two aspects of a main character that maybe not great representation of what a neurodivergency is, and then also not a good mystery at all. Yeah, I could be totally wrong on this. From your own opinion, go read about it. But yeah, overall, as a mystery on itself, it was a very disappointing mystery. So it'll probably end up on the most disappointing books of the year, because I had high hopes for this one. This one almost fell out. Our fourth prompt is, could have been 5 stars if it was written by someone else. So written by a different author. For this one, the one that I'm picking, it's mostly because it doesn't really fit into any of the other prompts that I had, but it is How to Pronounce Knife by Sovankam Tamavonska. I just fucked that up so bad, I just know it. This book, what can I say about it? This is a collection of short stories all about characters from Laos, which I had never read before, so that was very, very interesting, because it is a country that I don't know a lot about, and I've never read a story set there or with character from that country. So that aspect was very interesting, and I do love a good short story collection, but this short story just didn't hit in the way that I was hoping they would. I do remember some of them, but mostly they were a bit forgettable for me. And so what I mean with this prompt is that I feel like if it may have been a different author with a stronger writing style, because the writing style didn't really match, I feel like, the premise of each of the stories, so they ended up being a little bit forgettable. So I wish that the writing style was a bit stronger or a bit more unique on this one, because the premise was so unique, but the writing style just didn't reflect that, and it ended up being like a 3-star for me, because it was just a very forgettable experience. Overall, I wish the writing had been different, but I can't really say an author that I think would do this better. It's not really the purpose of this prompt. It's more of the story was interesting, the premise was interesting, the writing didn't reflect the uniqueness of the premise. And I think that that's the one that I would definitely say that this prompt applies to. Our fifth prompt is a book you can't stop thinking about. Okay. This could be a good prompt or a bad prompt. I'm going to use this for a bad prompt, and I'm going to say that I can't stop thinking about how disappointing the sequel to Finlay, Donovan is Killing It was. It's Finlay, Donovan Knocks Him Dead. I will be talking about Finlay, Donovan in a few prompts, because I read both of them this month, but I really just can't stop thinking about how disappointing it was. What can I say more about it, because I haven't talked about Finlay, Donovan is Killing It. The premise was interesting. The first book ended on a cliffhanger that I was very excited to get to the second book. Clearly, I read them back to back, which I never do with duologies or trilogies or whatever. I never do that. And so the premise was super interesting, and I was like, this book is actually going to kill it, because I feel like this author has a capability of delivering a good sequel, and it just didn't. It did not live up to the hype. I've seen a lot of people say the same thing that I did, but a lot of people still gave it like a 4-star or something. I gave it a 3, because it was just, I love this world. I love Finlay Donovan. She's a great main character. I love the side characters as well. I'm not loving the love triangle that's going on, but I can look past it. But the actual mystery aspect and the action behind this book just wasn't good. And it did not live up to the first one at all. It was confusing. There was way too much happening. There were way too many characters that were intertwined in things. And it just became a very confusing experience, and I did not enjoy it. And this is actually a trilogy. El Casamano is coming out with a new book next year, and I am not excited about that because this was very disappointing. And honestly, it didn't end on that much of a cliffhanger, the second book. So I'm like, what are you going to do with the third one? Like, what are you up to, El Casamano? Like, what are you going to do with this third one when the second one was not great? I will probably be reading it. There's no point for me to leave a trilogy up in the air like that, but this is very disappointing, and I can't stop thinking about it because I was sad. Our sixth prompt is a book you wish you DNF'd. The book that I'm going to mention from this, I'm half serious, I'm half not, because do I really wish I DNF'd this? Not really, but out of all of them, it's probably the one that I would have DNF'd, and that is Kingdom of the Wicked by Carmen Escalco. I read this because on my Tarot TBR, I came up with a prompt of reading a book from someone else's worst books of the year list, and this book came up a lot in a lot of people's worst books of the year list. So I knew what I was getting into, okay? And this book follows Emilia and Victoria. They are these witches that are hidden in Italy and Sicily, and basically their grandma tells them that they have this connection with the princes of hell and that they should always hide from the devil because they owe them a blood death. So what ends up happening is that Victoria is very brutally murdered, and Emilia summons a prince of hell to help her find out what happened to her sister. You would think that twin sisters would be more devastated about the death of the other, but Emilia wasn't really all that sad about it, which is confusing to me. But with that aside, I did kind of like the writing. This is my first Carmen Escalco book. I did kind of like the writing. I was expecting not to, but I did like it. The setting was atmospheric. It was fun. The plot did not deliver on any of it. It was confusing. It was predictable. It was not great. And so, do I wish I had DNF'd this? Kind of, because the ending was not worth it. Until the halfway point, it got me. In the first half, it got me. I'm not gonna lie. But the second half and the ending, they didn't do it for me. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue. I might, just for the clownery of it all, but I am not excited about it. Does that make sense? I think it does. I kind of wish I had DNF'd this. I didn't. I gave it 3 stars. In the first half, it got me. It was a fun time. And then it lost me. And then it wasn't so fun. But yeah, 3 stars. That's all that I gotta say. And our last prompt for this wrap-up will be this one. Let's figure this out. Oh, these are 2. I'm going to pick this one. Our last prompt is the best writing. So the book that had the best writing. Now listen, honestly, my best writing would go to Elena Knows by Claudia Pinheiro because that was my favorite writing of the month. But my second favorite writing of the month was probably Finlay, Donovan is Killing It by El Casamano. I love the casualty of the writing. I love the addictiveness of the writing. It was a very addicting book. You just want to keep going. And I like that it didn't take itself too seriously. It knew, like the book knew it was a silly mystery, and it didn't try to be anything else but that. And I really appreciate that because sometimes I feel like a book can suffer when the author tries to take it way too seriously and they're trying to prove that they're a very, very serious author. And I feel like that sometimes can take away from the book. And sometimes I like fun, silly books that are just that. So I really appreciated the writing of this one. Finlay Donovan, I feel like everyone knows what this book is about, but it's about our main character, Finlay, that is a writer and a single mother because she has just divorced her ex-husband and she is kind of broke, which honestly, same. And so she writes this kind of romance thrillers or mysteries. And so she is overheard in this Panera Bread shop talking about killing off a few of her characters, and one woman mistakes her for an assassin for hire. And so she is offered $50,000 to kill a man. Obviously, it goes downhill from that in the best way possible. It is just full of fun times and fun twists, and I really, really enjoyed this one. I gave it a 4.25. It wasn't the perfect 5-star I was hoping it would be, but it was just very fun. Some things felt a little bit convenient, but honestly, I was expecting that because if this needs to wrap up in a nice little bow, obviously some of the things that are going to happen are going to be a little bit too convenient. But otherwise, I really enjoyed this. It was a very addictive writing style, and yeah, I'm very sad that the sequel disappointed me so much because I did really enjoy this one. Okay, so those were the 7 books I read in April. I'm hoping May is a better month for me. You can already see my May TBR. It'll already be up, so check it out. And yeah, I hope that you had a better month than me. As always, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more bookish content, and I'll see you in my next video. I hope you have a nice day, and always remember that life is worth reading.